My ex kidnapped our kids and disappeared without a trace. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman posting my life online. But here I am sitting in my sister's guest room, my world in shambles, trying to make sense of the last 6 months. And honestly, I don't know if I'm being overly emotional or if my ex-husband has lost his mind. Let me start at the beginning. I was married to Mason for almost 10 years. We met in college. He was charming, funny, and wildly ambitious. He talked about having a big family and building a life together. We got married young and had 2 kids, Ella and Evan. I was a teacher. He was climbing the corporate ladder in engineering. It wasn't perfect, but I thought we were solid. Then last year, everything changed. It started small. Mason began staying late at work, talking about this new project he was leading. At first, I was proud of him. He was passionate and driven. But then the absences became longer, the phone calls more secretive, and our conversations shorter. I noticed he'd become obsessed with mindset, podcast stuff about reinventing yourself, cutting out toxic relationships, and creating your true life. I listened to one of them once and was disturbed by how cult-like it sounded. I brushed it off. Then I found the texts. Her name was Leah. She worked at his company, and from what I gathered, she was deeply into the same self-help, a manifest your truth lifestyle. They were talking about starting over, creating a new legacy, and reshaping the kids' identities. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together, and my children were a part of that life. When I confronted Mason, he didn't deny it. He said, "You're holding me back. Leah and I see the future differently. We're in alignment." I kicked him out. I filed for divorce within a week. At first, things were civil or as civil as they could be. Mason had joint visitation rights and took the kids every other weekend. I was wary, but he seemed committed to being a good dad, even if I hated his guts. But 3 months ago, everything spiraled. It was a regular Friday. Mason picked up Ella and Evan for his weekend. He said he'd bring them back Sunday evening. I kissed them goodbye, packed their overnight bags, and told them I'd see them in 2 days. But I didn't see them after that. Sunday night came. No Mason, no call. I waited until 10 p.m. before calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. Text went unread. I tried not to panic. Maybe something happened. Maybe they stayed somewhere without a signal. But by Monday morning, I was freaking out. I called his work, and they said he'd quit 2 weeks earlier. I called his parents. They hadn't seen him in days. I drove to his apartment, and it was cleaned out. Empty. Not a trace of him. Gone. I filed a missing persons report and contacted my lawyer. For 2 weeks, I was in full meltdown mode, not knowing if my kids were alive, if Mason had hurt them, if he'd gone off the grid. I couldn't eat or sleep. Every possible scenario ran through my head, most of them dark. Then one day I got a letter. It wasn't mailed. It was hand-delivered by a courier. The envelope was thick. Inside was a statement of intent from Mason and Leah. They had taken the kids to begin a new life, free from societal toxicity. Mason wrote that he had full custody rights, which he didn't, and that he had rescued Ella and Evan from the mental illness and toxic feminism that I represented. He accused me of being a controlling, emotionally unstable woman who stifled his personal growth and programmed the kids to fear masculine energy. Leah wrote a separate letter signed as Mother Guardian, claiming that she had taken a spiritual oath to deprogram the children from harmful belief systems. She said she had bonded with them on a soul level and that they were more emotionally regulated now than ever before. I was shaking. I wanted to throw up. They weren't just gone. They had been taken intentionally by 2 people who believed they were doing something righteous. I've spent the last 2 months trying to track them down. Private investigators? Legal motions? Nothing. It's like they vanished. Mason deleted all his social media accounts. Leah's were wiped clean. And Mason's bank accounts were either closed or funneled into cryptocurrency. There was no digital trail to follow. Then, last week, a postcard arrived from Arizona. It had a picture of a crystal shop on it, with a scrawled note in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. It was from Mason. They're safe. They're flourishing. We're finally free. Please stop poisoning their growth. That's when I lost it. I posted everywhere, tagging every mutual friend, calling Mason a kidnapper. I shared the letters. I named names. I begged anyone who had information to come forward. Some people supported me. Others didn't. Apparently some of Mason's friends, the same ones who'd bought into his reinvention garbage, think I'm overreacting, that I'm bitter, and using the kids as weapons. That Mason didn't kidnap them, he's just breaking cycles, and living authentically. Now, his new crew of spiritual believers is messaging me, accusing me of abuse, saying I should be grateful the kids are being raised in a conscious community with love-centered parenting. One of them had the audacity to say that I was the reason Mason had to go dark because I was emotionally vampiric. I went back to court immediately with the letters and the card from Arizona. I thought it would be enough for an emergency custody motion. I thought someone would finally say, yes, this man is clearly dangerous. Let's go get your kids. But the legal system is a different kind of nightmare. For a moment, it felt like no one was going to help. It felt like I was shouting into a system that just didn't care. Thankfully, the judge granted an emergency motion giving me sole legal and physical custody, but it would only take effect once. Mason was located and served. Until then, it was like walking into a dead end. I had full custody on paper, but no power to actually enforce it. In the meantime, I dug into Leah's past. She wasn't just a random coworker Mason fell for. She'd been involved with a healing collective in Sedona, Arizona. They ran workshops on ancestral trauma repair, ego-death immersion, and reparenting your inner child through psychedelic fasting. It sounded like satire until I realized this was the group Mason had been listening to on his podcasts. It wasn't just spiritual woo-woo. It was a fringe ideology that saw traditional families as oppressive and children as blank. Slates to be reprogrammed into higher beings. And now my kids are wrapped up in it. Then I got another letter. This one was from Ella. It was in a plain white envelope. The handwriting was too neat, like a child who had been coached. She wrote that she loved me and missed me, but that she was healing from emotional dysregulation and learning to set boundaries with people who want to control her light. She said Leah was teaching her how to be a soul warrior, and that Evan was doing great and is more connected to his body. My daughter is 7. She's never used the word dysregulation in her life. That's all I received. A letter that didn't even sound like her. No return address. No proof of where they could be. The FBI barely got involved. A case officer was assigned under parental abduction, but since it crossed state lines and there were no active threats, the case moved slowly. They reminded me I wasn't the only mother in the system. I was told to stay hopeful and to document everything. Later that week, I got a message from a woman who saw my post about Mason kidnapping our kids. She said she'd been part of the same group as Leah but left a year ago after Leah started pushing for members to reclaim sacred family structures. She also said Leah and Mason had spoken openly about starting a new family, not just blending one, starting one, as in erasing the old one. They believed modern families were toxic and that society needed to reset its parenting by deliberately breaking up families and creating new ones through rebonding. When I asked if she knew where they were, she hesitated. I think they're at the Desert Haven compound. It's not public and it's off-grid. But Leah talked about going there to start their transition phase. I don't know the exact location, though. I gave the information to the FBI. Again, they thanked me and told me to be patient. So I did what any desperate mother would do. I drove to Arizona. I didn't tell the police. I didn't tell my lawyer. I rented a car, printed every photo I had of Mason, Leah, Ella, and Evan. I went to different shops, cafes, and desert retreat centers, showing their pictures and begging for answers. No one knew anything. No one helped. That night, I called my sister from a motel and sobbed for 45 minutes straight. I was spiraling. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. She begged me to come home, said I was endangering my legal case by going rogue. She was right, but I just wanted to see my kids so badly. That night, I had a dream that Ella and Evan were calling for me. When I woke up, I realized I hadn't heard their voices in almost 3 months. So now here I am, waiting, documenting, fighting a system that wasn't built for this kind of abuse, watching as my children are turned into spiritual trophies for 2 delusional people who think they're healing the world. And people still have the nerve to ask me, "Are you sure this isn't just a messy custody dispute?" No, it's not. It's a conversion. It's a kidnapping. And every day they're with him, I lose a little more of them. About 3 weeks ago, I finally got a solid lead. A private investigator I'd hired tracked Mason and Leah to a remote property just outside Utah. It was a small, off-grid wellness retreat located on private trust land, with solar panels, a makeshift garden, and canvas yurts. The whole place felt like a fantasy bubble. And then there was a photo of my daughter walking barefoot across the sand. Without telling my lawyer or the police, I drove out there with my sister early one morning. I couldn't wait for a legal battle. I had to see my kids. We arrived to find a small group meditating by a fire pit. I spotted Ella and Evan sitting under a canopy with Leah, playing with crystals and coloring. Leah had her arms around them like they were her own. I screamed, "Ella, Evan!" They froze. Leah and Mason came over calmly. Mason looked disappointed, not angry. He said, "You're not centered. This isn't how you enter a healing space." I shoved past Mason and knelt before my kids. "Ella and Evan, it's me, Mommy. We're going home." Leah put herself between us and said, "Don't disrupt their alignment. They've been healing." I lost control and slapped her. The rage I'd held for months exploded. Mason stepped in front of her, saying, "This is why we had to protect them. From your violent energy." I shouted back, "You ran away and dragged my kids into your delusion. You're not enlightened. You're a coward." I turned to my kids and said softly, my voice shaking, "You don't have to say anything. Just come with me. I love you." There was a long silence, like the world had stopped breathing. Evan looked at me, his little face blank like he was scanning a distant memory for recognition. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and took my hand. His grip was small but steady. Ella stood still. Her eyes flicked from me to Leah, then to Mason. She looked torn on what to do, but Mason gave a small nod, almost like he was granting her permission. That bothered me, but I stayed silent. Ella stepped toward me slowly. I wrapped an arm around both of them and started walking away. Mason's voice followed us like a curse. "They'll come back when they realize who they really are." I didn't respond. I didn't look back. The kids are home now, but they're not the same. They talk about energy contamination and Mommy's trauma field. Sometimes I catch them meditating in silence, repeating phrases that don't sound like theirs. I don't know how long it will take to undo the brainwashing, or if I ever fully can. But every morning, when I hear their footsteps on the stairs, when I see Ella picking cereal or Evan humming a tune, I know I did the right thing. I brought them home. I don't know what our life will look like from here, but I know where it begins with love, safety, and truth. And I'll rebuild their joy, one day at a time, no matter what it takes. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.